So in the last video, we looked at how to work with the text animators. Now we're going to look at some of the more advanced options for them that might be useful for you when you're creating your projects. First thing I want to do is I want to get my range selector back to being what it was before, which is everything being affected. So I'm going to move back to my first keyframe where my start's at 0 and my end's at 100. And I'm going to disable my keyframes to get rid of the animation. I also want to take my rotation off. We're actually going to apply position instead because it'll actually help make one of the advanced options a little bit easier to understand. So I'm going to set my rotation to be 0. We don't have to remove it. We can just set it to be 0, and that way it'll take all the rotation off. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add a new property to this animator. We're going to add a position property. And you don't want to do this from the animate menu. That would actually possibly add a whole new animator, and then you'll have two animators doing different things. We want to add it to the existing animator. So what we want to do is go to our animator. Then to the right of that, you'll see an add menu. Select that. We want to add a property, and we're going to choose the position property. And we'll leave it be for right now. Actually, let's lower the Y value of it. We're going to lower our Y value a little bit, and that's going to raise it up. Now, if you try adjusting your start and end properties, you'll see that as the range shrinks, the letters will go back down to they originally were, whether you wipe it from the end to the beginning or the beginning to the end. Let's look at a couple of the properties within our advanced section. So I'm going to expand that out. And the first one I want to look at is this based on right here. Right now it's based on characters. That means that each character is going to individually move as the range selector goes through it. If you have a longer piece of text like this, that's usually not what you want because it's going to be way too much movement. So I would say if you have more than 3 words, it's probably better to switch away from being characters and instead go with words instead. And this way each word animates instead of each character. Now, if I make adjustments to my range, we can say instead of the entire or each letter going down, it's the entire word going down. Go ahead and switch that back to characters. And now what we're going to do is we're going to look at the different shapes that can be made with this. Right now the default shape is square, and that means that you get a very even amount of dispersion while your range selector moves through it. So if I'm right on the edge of each of these letters, you can see as I drag through here, they're just kind of dropping down. Instead, if you want to have it move in a different pattern, you can do that by changing your shape. And this is where it comes in handy to have your position property versus like a rotation property. It makes it a little bit easier to understand. So what we want to do is we want to frame this word quick first. And it's easier to do this if you use your selection tool on this range selector UI on the screen versus trying to use the numbers down here, because sometimes you end up halfway through a letter and it'll go partially down. But if you use this, it'll actually snap to the edge of your letter. So I'm going to grab my selection tool. I'm going to grab this first range and move it over to letter Q. I'll grab this second range and move it up to the K. So this is an example of how the square works. We can see that everything within the range has an even amount of position property applied to it. Now let's change our shape from square to triangle. So you'll see that it kind of makes a triangle. And it does this by applying the max amount in the center, and then it lowers the amount as you move towards the edges. And this is why it's helpful to use the position property with the Y value. So you can actually see the shape that's being made. Below triangle are both round and smooth. They're very similar to triangle, except round rounds out the center. So it's sort of like you put handles on a point in Illustrator here to bend out that line. And then smooth would put the handles on the side, so it almost makes like a W or the middle part of a W. So it sweeps up here, and you have kind of your easing on the left and right versus in the middle. The other two shapes you can make are ramp up and ramp down. They're a little bit difficult to get used to, but they can be very helpful if you want a smoother transition with your text animators. So the ramp up What it's going to do is it's going to ramp up. It starts with nothing at the beginning and then goes towards 100% at the end. And what makes this a little difficult to work with is this will actually work outside of your range. So that anything on past your endpoint will actually take on 100% of whatever those properties are. Anything before your start will take on 0%. The same is true for ramp down, except it just goes the opposite direction. So I would recommend trying out the different properties, trying different combinations, and just trying to get used to how the start and end within the range selector work. That's going to be how most of your text animation is going to get done.